You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
OneTrack is a new choice for progressive dairies looking to simplify feeding practices and elevate performance. Fed at up to 40% of the ration, this high-energy macro ingredient works alongside on-farm ingredients to reduce sourcing, mixing, and batching, freeing up valuable time and resources. For more information, go to onetrackwrite.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Dairy Voice podcast by Dairy Business News. I'm your host, Connie Kuber with Seal Pro Silage Barrier Films by Connor AgriScience. Thanks for joining us today. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends. And before we get started, I always keep in mind that we have listeners who are not part of the dairy industry, and we appreciate you learning about the great lengths that the dairy industry goes to educate and share information that benefits not only the cattle we manage, but the people who consume our products. So thank you for listening. Today's podcast, forward-thinking, diversification, opportunity, entrepreneurship, all positive words to describe an energetic vibe, a can-do attitude, and a think outside the box outlook. My guest today exudes all these with a healthy dose of pragmatic and calculated thinking. Mark Crave is the managing partner for Crave Brothers Farm and Farmstead Cheese, and he's here today to tell his family story and talk about dairy in his world. So listen closely and you'll find some of that positive energy rubbing off on you. So welcome to the Dairy Voice podcast, Mark. Please tell us about yourself, the Crave Brothers, and also tell me about your role as treasurer of the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin.
Sure. Well, thanks, Connie, for that kind introduction. And so, as you stated, I'm the managing partner at Crave Brothers Farm and Farmstead Cheese in Waterloo, Wisconsin, which is roughly midway between Madison and Milwaukee in southern, south central, southeast Wisconsin. Here we have a family-owned and led dairy business that's vertically integrated. So we grow crops, mainly forage crops. We have a 2,200 cow dairy herd. We also raise all of our young stock here on site. We have across the road, about a football field length from our milking parlor, we have a Farmstead cheese plant that's been in existence for 23 years now. We'll talk about more of that as we go through. And then capping that off, kind of the third leg of a three-legged stool is we have an on-farm methane digester. So we process all of the waste from the dairy herd and from the cheese factory, and we generate electricity and process all that waste and try to get the most out of the waste, capitalizing and capturing value as we can out of everything we touch here.
And tell me about the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin briefly and your role with them.
So Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin is our state checkoff that dairy farmers all contribute to. And, nationally, we can have a 15-cent checkoff. 5 cents of that goes to Chicago for our national programming. 10 cents of that goes to Madison, where our organization focuses mainly on cheese, but of course all dairy, but mainly on cheese. Remember, we have a 90-90 rule, and that is that 90% of the milk in Wisconsin is converted into cheese, and 90% of that cheese leaves the state. So we are all about promoting our wonderful, super high quality, flavorful cheeses that we produce here in Wisconsin. And I'm proud to be one of 25 directors from around the state who leads and directs a very talented staff of marketers and forward-thinking strategic marketers to help move our product.
Right. I wasn't aware of the 90-90. That's very interesting.
That's why the focus really, oftentimes we kind of used to joke and quip that we were the cheeseheads. And once you look at the numbers, it's like, that's the truth.
Yeah.
Once in a while, farmers or people will say, well, I don't ship to a cheese factory, or why don't we talk about butter? Why don't we spend more time talking about ice cream? And we certainly like talking about those things, but remember, our checkout programs are about having consumers take home and enjoy the products that we produce here on the farm. And how we do that in Wisconsin, 90% of that is through cheese. So that's why our marketing emphasis is behind that.
So you told me that Crave Brothers the cheese operation is 23 years old.
We've dairy farmed on this site since 1981. So my older brothers started here at a very young age, in their very early 20s, started farming here. And a couple other of us younger brothers joined over time. And we were solely dairy farmers up until about that 2001. So first 20 years of our existence was just purely dairy farming. And we were innovative dairy producers. We're always looking at ways to grow and modernize our facilities and our operation. And we grew that way. And then we kind of went through a period where we said, okay, what's next? And then in 2001, we started construction of our cheese factory that's still here, and started producing cheese in 2002.
This episode is brought to you by DRMS, a trusted provider of dairy information and decision tools. As a nonprofit with deep ties to NC State and Iowa State universities, we've spent over 65 years serving the dairy industry, delivering research-backed software, standardized data, and exceptional customer support. Our dedicated team works alongside producers and consultants to ensure they get the training, tools, and insights they need. We turn complex herd data into clear, actionable insights that help producers and consultants make informed decisions every day through solutions built in collaboration with the dairy industry. Learn more at drms.org.
How did you get the idea to start this cheese factory?
As I said, we spent 20 years really growing the dairy herd, and it was a lot of work. It was a labor of love, but it was 70, 80-hour weeks. We got to a point where we said, okay, we've grown, we've got some level of a modern type of farm here. What's next? And to just go out and milk more cows and farm more acres, well, it's intriguing. We said, what else is there besides more milk, more manure, more feed, more work? And we started looking at we looked at how consumers were spending their money in the country, and we looked at ways to add value to our milk. And at that time, one of the big movements was to organic, certified organic dairy and other commodities, of course. But looking purely from the dairy, and we saw some of our acquaintance, some of our colleagues in the industry adapting that methodology. We said, not everyone who's buying organic is looking for that seal, that label. Some of them are, certainly, but a lot of the others, consumers, are really looking for a connection to the farm. They're looking to get away from maybe some processed food, getting back to a little bit more of a cooking from scratch and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so we said, we can do some of that without going full blown organic. We were just looking at a way to add value to our milk, and being in Wisconsin, being cheeseheads, we worked with some marketers, and we came up the plan of producing fresh cheeses, meaning not aged. And so when we talk fresh cheeses, we make fresh mozzarella, mascarpone, and a lot of string cheese in various formats, mainly in a queso Oaxaca, which would be a string cheese tied in a knot that would be traditional in a Mexican or Latin America with a large population, especially in the Southwest United States, but all over the country now. Those are the three main cheeses we produce. So all those cheeses are the best the day you make it. They have a limited shelf life, anywhere from 1 month to 6 months. We felt it worked well with our fresh milk and farmstead cheese production.
That answers the question of why you chose those particular products. Do you make anything besides fresh cheeses?
We do concentrate our whey. We sell off whey protein concentrate. We sell some cream, some whey cream. Really, the vast majority of our revenue is from those fresh cheeses.
Hi, I'm Tim Hammerich. Looking for your next podcast? Check out the Fresh Cow Files from Zoetis, where we'll discuss hot industry topics, including antibiotic stewardship, employee training, transition cow periods, and more.
If you show that you're invested in this farm and that you care about those things like consistency and reaching production goals and reaching reproduction goals, and then invest in your employees, you will have a more productive, a more efficient, more profitable farm.
So if you're ready for some eye-opening insights, I sincerely hope you'll join us on the Fresh Cow Files. available wherever you listen to podcasts.
So when you started, sure that you had to have a business plan. How did you go all about before you even started your first batch of cheese? What kinds of business plans did you have to do?
Well, we had some experience in developing business plans because, as I stated earlier, we've been here since 1981. We farm about 60 miles from where we grew up along the the Illinois state line. And when my older brother started farming, we had a outside partner who was a college professor at the time. And, just by nature of starting a farm from scratch, buying some cows, buying equipment for the first 3 years was a rented farm. We're just forced to put business plans together, as rudimentary as they maybe were at the time, to say, how are we going to do this? This wasn't just a farm sitting here that we just, moved in and said, yeah, I'll tomorrow morning I'll milk. Dad, you take the day off. We had to have a lot more of a plan than that. And then also by having a partner who wasn't here every day, forced my brothers and I, when we had an idea to build a bunker silo or build a calf barn, we oftentimes would talk about it throughout the workday, and then we'd say, okay, well, Dave's coming Saturday. What are we going to tell him?
Sure.
And so we were just forced by just the nature of the beast to think along those lines and have some of the math. And we anticipated what his questions were going to be. We didn't have a lot of capital. We didn't have money in the bank saved up. So we knew a lot of those projects, we were going to be going to the bank. And so we needed a business plan for the banker as well. That's how we farm. And as I mentioned earlier, we grew the farm quite a lot in those years. And I came here in 1988 when I graduated from the University of Wisconsin, and we had 125 cows then. And so in 2000, when we kind of came up with this idea of a cheese factory, we were up to about 800 at that time. And so we had constantly been growing, borrowing money, paying it back, buying a farm, buying cows. We never had a status quo. So we just followed that same mindset. What really, around the actual business plan. So the business plan kind of pulled itself together.
Sure.
What really was different when we went into the value added was we no longer had a guaranteed market. When we combine corn, milk the cows, and put the milk in the tank, there's a place to go, right? The truck comes, picks it up, takes it to the creamery, takes it to the co-op, you drop it off, you get a check. There's very little marketing involved from us. Once those relationships are established, you just keep producing, right? Farmers are great producers. Had worked with a marketer. These are the types of cheeses we're going to try to produce. We had the farmstead story. We knew we had a great marketing story from having this being produced as a farmstead cheese. But then the missing piece was, okay, that all sounds great, but let me taste it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to give full credit at this. As we grew this, my brother George and his wife Debbie took the lead on the not just the concept, but also the implementation, right?
Okay.
We all worked together and said, okay, this is what we're willing to do. All my brothers and I, are we willing to invest in this? We challenged each other with some difficult questions. And then once we committed to it and say, hey, this is the path we want to go down, George and Debbie really led the charge as far as working with other marketers, working with distributors, planning what trade shows we're going to go to, and literally built a business from the ground up, from maybe one or two vats a week up to what we're producing today. And just by growing with some key customers, we were fortunate to land some key customers early in the game because our emphasis was always on quality. We knew that you could have the greatest story in the world, but if your cheese isn't any better than the next guy up the road, now you're just going to compete on price. And we will not be in business if we compete on price. We're not a low-cost cheese producer. We're very clear with that. So that means that we really have to raise the bar and produce high quality products. And for the most part, we've been able to do that over the last 23 years.
So is 100% of your milk made into your cheese?
Yeah, basically, seasonally right now in the summer, we're using all of our milk. In the wintertime around holidays, it's the seasonality changes of what types of cheese we eat and how people eat. So, but in essence, yeah, we're using all of our milk from our 2,000 cows.
When you and your brothers were planning all this, I understand you probably had a marketing plan of how you were going to get this cheese distributed and that kind of thing. What about labor, logistics? How did that work out?
Well, starting with the product development, we have a great resource in Wisconsin, which is the Center for Dairy Research, which is a public-private entity. It's housed on the University of Wisconsin campus in Madison. They have a pilot plant and a dairy plant there right on campus. Good chunk of their funding comes through dairy farmers of Wisconsin. So their role there is to help with product development, maybe helping with product improvement, quality issues, troubleshooting, certainly new product development. And we worked with them before we ever, very early in the game, and we were turned on to fresh mozzarella to say, hey, this might be something that you guys should consider. We loaded up some milk cans in the wee hours of the morning, went to Madison with 5 cans, the old school, 5 cans full of milk. My brother worked with John Yagi from the Center for Dairy Research, and he came back at about 3 p.m. with some cups filled with fresh mozzarella balls. And we tried them and said, okay, let's keep looking at this. And so we've had that great resource, and we still continue to work with the Center for Dairy Research today. They're still funded through a lot of our checkoff dollars, and they've developed so many wonderful cheeses and wonderful products and help dairy processors produce great products. So then once we had the products, then we just started working, a lot of it is distribution. We've had a lot of farmers early in the game that says, oh, good for you guys. You cut out the middleman. And we'd laugh and say, no, we only cut out one. That is just the processor. Yeah. We still need all of the systems in place that are there for logistics, distribution, certainly all the quality and everything that goes with taking a dairy product or a highly perishable dairy product from manufacturing all the way to get to a retail setting. And oftentimes there's many different people in the way. And to be honest, some of our customers, we personally don't even know what stores some of that product is sold in. We'll sell it to a distributor, and then those customers are their customers. They're not our customers. They're customers of that distributor.
Get your Seal Pro silage barrier film today. Protect the seed, fertilizer, labor, and expensive inputs that you've invested in. Choose best-in-class Seal Pro now in 3 different versions: traditional 2-roll application, our new co-rolled application, and super simple and wildly successful 1-layer film, Seal Pro 1. It's easy to buy, easy to use. Contractor covering? We'll work with them. Learn more at sealprosilage.com. That's SEALPRO silage.com. Family owned and operated for over 25 years. 559-779-5961. That's 559-779-5961.
So I have to ask you, what does your public relations plan look like in case of an emergency or a problem with your cheese?
Mm-hmm. First off, we are an SQF facility. So SQF stands for Safe Quality Food. It's a food safety standard that is really the benchmark for, certainly in dairy, but in a lot of food production. And within that, we go through, it covers how we do everything we do. And included in SQF would be a plan in the case that something happened. And so we have a plan that we would go to, and we would contact the proper authorities. We would certainly contact some of our industry trade groups to help us with some PR and that type of thing. And they would be the link, to help us. We have a lot of support through our trade groups and as part of our SQF plan of what would happen if.
Well, and I think that's a pitfall that people don't think about when they're starting up these entrepreneurial brand new projects and products and that kind of thing. You've got to think about worst case scenarios that you're going to have to face and have a plan for them, so that if indeed something happens, you're aware, you've got a system in place, everything's going to be okay, and you fix the problem. So I just think I applaud you for doing that. That's
Oh, absolutely. And you have to, you started by asking about a business plan, and that certainly needs to be part of your business plan of the what ifs. I remember way back in the day, we went through all these processes in planning that I told you about. And then we bit the bullet. We borrowed $1.5 million and built a cheese factory, and we had never made a pound of cheese before.
Yeah.
And so we really had our toes hanging out over the board, if you will, at that time. But we knew that we had a balance sheet that could sustain that. And if we had never made a pound of cheese, if we had to go out and nail the door shut a month after we built the facility, we knew that we could withstand that. Yeah, it would have been a gut punch, but we know it would, in theory, it wouldn't have taken the rest of the operation down.
Right.
So that's something we've always had, is that by being diversified, you need strong legs to stand on. And we used to joke, my brother used to joke with people that would say, what's it take to build a farmstead cheese plant? And he said, a damn good herd of dairy cows.
A very calculated, good planning on your part. I agree. You have to do that. Just basics. How many people do you employ? And you had talked about the outside, the distributors and the supporting, but do you have a marketing firm that also helps you with your business?
In-house, I'm one of 10 family members who works here or has worked here. My older brothers and sister-in-law are in different phases of retirement. 5 of those 10 are next generation. So I lead the group of next generation family members that all play different roles. One's a cheesemaker, one's a herd manager, my niece Roseanne works in marketing and sales. I have a niece who's our director of quality and customer service. Another nephew who's in charge of maintenance. Just look at the wide range of skills we have there. And then across the board, in addition to those family members I shared, we have about 90 full-time staff on both sides of the road, from calf feeders and maternity people and milkers and herds of people to lab personnel, maintenance. We have licensed cheesemakers, people that work in shipping and receiving. We have the whole gamut. We rely on support, a lot of different support people from the people that prepare our taxes. When you think about it, there's a lot of things that we're not experts on. And so we rely on some of our vendors to help us with that. And certainly we rely on our trade organizations first and foremost, our great support, both like Dairy Business Association, the Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association. We already talked about Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. We just rely on those organizations a lot. And then we work with a marketing company, Stir, who has inroads in the dairy industry too. So we work with a lot of different people. But at the end of the day, one thing that we're always clear is at the end of the day, we can work with trade groups and we can get a lot of support. But at the end of the day, it's our business. And whatever we're participating in needs in the end to benefit what it is we're doing and what our goals are.
Do you have quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, annual meetings with your family and your group?
Over time, it's evolved, what we used to. And so starting with today, the farm and the cheese business have 2 separate staffs. Management is pulled apart during the day. So we have 2 separate management meetings every week that I participate in both of those as the managing partner. And so those are scheduled and those happen every week at a scheduled time. And I would say there's 5 and 5. There's 5 in each of those management meetings. Then outside of that, we will have meetings more on a scheduled basis for owners. So for example, just yesterday we met with our loan officer. We had to sign some papers and things like that. And so we scheduled that as its own standalone. And so I tend to be in my role as the chief communicator. So one of the things is we always need to wear different hats, especially in a smaller business. So, there's days I'm wearing my farmer hat. There's days I'm wearing my managing partner hat. There's days I'm wearing an owner hat. For example, when we meet as owners, we're meeting more as equals. Many times people would say, well, how do you decide if you're going to do something? Do you vote or what? And I'm like, you know what, man, if it comes to spending $1.5 million to build a cheese factory, there's no voting. It's all in or all out,
Yeah.
And that's part of our family culture. And once we're in, as I stated earlier, once we're in, we're very committed to it. And I think that's kind of a family trait. I think maybe that's something we probably learned from our parents and certainly from my dad was, you can talk about things and have a lot of different ideas, but when it comes time to commit to something, then it's everybody's in and there's no second guessing. There's no going to bowling alley or to church and saying, well, my brother wanted to build a cheese factory and I don't know what the heck he was doing. I'm amazed the number of people that go and kind of kick the dirt around some decisions that are being made within their family business and they're not buying in on it. And I'm like, whoa, that is not a good place to be.
Well, and you kind of touched on a question that I wanted to ask you about is your family as entrepreneurs. And there seems like there are people who have that mindset and there are people who don't. And I was going to ask about, have you seen this in your family? Is this something you grew up with as boys? How do you see that?
It's funny to hear that from you describing me as that, because that's not necessarily how, you don't get up every day and say, boy, I'm an entrepreneur today.
Yeah.
But when people look at you and describe it, so it is an interesting feedback. And I do have to acknowledge that first and foremost, my parents were both strong believers in education. Both my parents had college degrees. I have a lot of well-educated people in my family. And so my mom was on our local school board. So there was no skirting around the fact that, yeah, you needed to go to school. You needed to work hard at it. We were involved in 4-H, which is an awesome program for learning all kinds of skills. And one of the biggest ones in hindsight is leadership. Really teaches you what a leader is, even if it's getting up at a meeting and giving a 2-minute presentation, right? When you're 8 years old, that's a big deal. And you build on those skills. So my parents all supported us in that type of thing. And then on a personal level, my dad was always a guy that was, as he would say, thinking out loud. He would always be saying, well, if we did this and then that happened, and would challenge us even as kids to say, well, if that, he went to a lot of open houses, a lot of extension meetings, a lot of we met many a time. We got in the car and drove to Madison to field days, agronomy field days or dairy field days. And then the whole way home, he'd be talking out loud about, well, if that barn is 200 feet long and there's 200 cows in it, then if we wanted to have 100 cows, how big would the barn need to be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he would really tease us into thinking. And so we always had that approach about there's got to be a better way to do things. He'd say, hey, if they can send a rocket to the moon with a man on it, we sure ought to be able to milk a cow without crawling underneath her. Right. And so he would always challenge the convention and saying, and then the other half of that was, it wasn't just having some ideas, because there's a lot of people that have ideas and sometimes they can border on being crazy, but he was also a do-it-yourselfer. So we inherited the ability early in our careers. We poured thousands of yards of concrete. I'm not exaggerating. We built our own bunker silos that we poured here at the home site. We poured slats for barns. We pounded rafters together. We would buy used steel. We would go part out, let's say an old building or something, and cut everything up. I remember we bought a horse arena once and took all the trusses out and everything, and we used those trusses to build some dry cow housing. So that was the other half of the occasion. Is we built a lot of sweat equity just because my dad taught us how to swing a hammer.
Talking about equipment and facilities, I got to move on to your methane digester. Tell me about that. How long you've had it? What was the decision process in getting involved in that kind of a piece of equipment, and how it's going for you?
Well, we've had a manure digester in place on our farm for almost 19 years now. So yeah, and that kind of that mid 2005 to 2015 time period was kind of that new wave of digesters. There was certainly some around before that, but the technology was improving at that time. And we had the opportunity to have a digester built here that we didn't have to put capital in. It was built by a large electrical contractor from Milwaukee, and they wanted to get in the green energy business. And so they approached us and a couple other area farms about building this. And so they put a lot of good engineering behind it. The previous ones were kind of farmer engineered, and so this was really a well-engineered facility. And shortly after they got in the production side of things, they remembered that they were electricians and not operators, and especially operating a system that's main ingredient is cow manure in Wisconsin winters, right? And so so over the time, the opportunity came for us to buy that system. And so we run it ourselves, and we put all those waste streams into it. We bring in a little bit of outside material, some soybean oil, kind of a sludge comes off of the oil refining, and that generates some extra gas for us. And we produce enough gas to fire a generator, which powers fires an engine that powers a generator, produces 630 kilowatts per hour. So that, in layman's terms, that's about how much electricity an average Midwestern home would use in a month. So every hour that runs, we're powering a home for a month. And that's about half of the biogas. The other half is used to dry the bedding. So we put the manure, we put the cheese waste in the tanks. It ferments, produces and you're always feeding it. You're always feeding it. You're always removing it. It's like a cow's rumen. You always are adding to it, and you're feeding the bacteria is what you're doing. You're feeding the bugs. So every day, about 18 hours a day, we're taking manure out and we're separating it. We put it through a screw press that squeezes, recaptures about 40% of the solids. Then those solids go through a big rotary drum dryer that is fueled by biogas also. So we're creating our own energy that goes in, and we dry that bedding. We take about 20 percentage points of moisture off of it to where it's when we put it back under the cows in their free stalls, it's a drier, almost like it has like a potting soil type of feel to it. It's inert. We burned off a lot of the volatile compounds, and we put that back under the cows, and it's a nice, soft, fairly dry material, and it's totally renewable, right? I mean, we bring in very little outside bedding off of the farm. So in addition to producing the electricity and the bedding, we produce heat. The engine creates heat, and the first of that heat is used to heat the digester itself. In addition to that, we heat 3 or 4 buildings around the farm, our farm shop, a farmhouse, and actually the office I'm sitting in. If it was in wintertime, that would be heated with off of the digester. And then the last product is still fertilizer. Probably 95% of what goes in the digester comes out and ends up in our concrete lined lagoons, where it's stored as a liquid fertilizer, and we apply that to the fields, throughout the season.
In full circle, then, how do you project or inform your consumer about the efforts that you're making in order to close that circle?
I tell them just what I just told you. I explain how it works. One of the opportunities, our number one marketing plan before we ever started in cheese production is still in place today, and that's to get as many consumers as we can here on the farm. When I say consumers, people that are making decisions to buy cheese. Deli case managers, dairy case managers, cheesemongers, management from different retail chains. We try to get them out here, and we give them a plant tour, we taste cheese, and then we either get on the bus or we do a walking tour of the farm, and I tell them exactly what we're doing. I show them how we take the manure back to the field, fertilize the soil to grow the crops, to feed the cows in this sustainable loop. You can really see the light go on when you explain how you're doing the whole thing. And of course, the digester is an extreme way of showing some level of sustainability. And I always explain all the way back to crop rotations and some of the other practices, water conservation, some of the other practices we already do, even if something as complicated as genomically testing our cattle. A gallon of milk today has a fraction of the carbon footprint that it would have had in 1950.
Are they concerned about cow animal welfare and cow comfort as well?
They are. It's not as hot a topic as it was maybe 15 years ago. There certainly have a pet owner's view of livestock, and I kind of explain the difference between livestock and pets and people. We're different. Farmers view it differently, but then I have the opportunity to say, but let's talk about that. Here's a comfortable freestall that's well bedded with dry, clean bedding. Cow comes up, she has a balanced diet in front of her. She can consume as much as she cares to eat. She stands on hot weather. She's standing under a fan and has a sprinkler over her back that sprinkles cool water on her. We want to see her lay down. We're monitoring how often, what her rumination scores are like. We're monitoring how much milk she produces. We're getting signals from the milking parlor if she's off milk or off feed. And so when you explain people like that, like the kind of the systematic approach of how you're doing things, then they say, oh, okay, yeah, I guess those cows are being well cared for, aren't they?
Right.
And we'll go up in our calf nursery and show all the calves in the individual pens and the clean. It used to be people thought it was cruel to when a calf wasn't with the cow, and ever since COVID, it's a different conversation, right? We have that to go back to and say, hey, remember when we all socially distance? Well, that's what a calf hutch is. That's what a calf nursery is we're socially distancing those calves so they all stay healthy.
Listen, we've talked about a lot of different things. What plans do you have for the future?
The future's the future. We can do whatever the heck we want, but
Right.
we're kind of on the backside of fairly extensive succession planning process. So as I said, my brothers and my three older brothers were probably, they're probably within 5 years of age of each other. And so we kind of had this hanging out there. It's like, okay, guys, what are we going to do when? And so we've always taken a very proactive approach, and we engaged a succession planning professional who came in, and we went through the whole process of how do we meet and doing personality profiles. And we really gave it an extensive run. And now we're on the back side of that to where they're retired. We have our next generation involved here. We've hired some professional staff. We've hired a general manager at our cheese plant. We've hired our own staff accountant. We have our own HR professional. We have an office manager. Those positions didn't even exist 5 years ago when we started our succession plan. So a succession plan isn't just who's going to own it, but it's really on how are you going to run the business. And so now that we've gotten to that point, I'm very excited. We're on the front end of a plant expansion. We're going to add on to our process. This will be about the 5th edition on our cheese factory since we built it in 2001. So we're going to continue to grow that. We're going to continue to develop the dairy herd. We're going to continue to implement best practices, both around cattle, crops, people, cheese, and just keep going like that.
Well, good. We've talked about a lot of different things here today. And, I started this out with some words that I had thought were probably going to be part of this conversation: forward thinking, diversification, opportunity, entrepreneurship. And I think that you've covered them all, Mark. This has been a really interesting conversation. Do you have anything that you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
We all love agriculture. That's why we're listening to this, or that's certainly why you and I are together today. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I always remind people, I have a very unique opportunity in that I get to engage with a lot of consumers, and I'll share with them. A lot of my neighbors don't get to do that. They'll talk to the milk truck driver or the guy at the co-op that runs the intake, but that's where it ends. And so one of the things that I remind people is when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to farming, when it comes to cattle, when it comes to cheese, we always have to remind ourselves that we're the experts, and that people, it's easy to think, oh, consumers don't like this, or, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. And what I always find is that people are very enlightened. They're very appreciative when we share the how and the what and the why of what we do. So I would just encourage people to listen to this, to have those conversations and speak, and don't just talk farmer talk, but speak in consumer terms, right? Speak to something that they'll understand, like I shared with some of what you did today already. And you'll oftentimes find that people are very receptive and actually very enthused. They'll say, hey, when I go home, I'm going to look for your cheese, or I wait till I tell my husband what I just learned on this trip. So go ahead and use your voice, because you always have to remember you're the expert in the room.
So where can people find Crave Brothers cheese?
Well, you can go to our website, cravecheese.com, and we list some of the retailers there where people can find it. And it's not just our cheese. There's a lot of wonderful cheeses that are produced in Wisconsin. WisconsinDairy.org is our Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin website. And you'll find a lot of information there. And actually, back to our cravecheese.com website, we have a lot of recipes also. So if you are able to find some of our cheese, we have whole pages of recipes where you can go home and make something probably that's fairly seasonal, that hopefully your family enjoys, or if they don't enjoy it, you can enjoy it yourself.
Say the website again, please, Mark.
Cravecheese.com, CRAVE cheese.com. We have a great website, and there's a lot of information on there, and they will have places that listed there that you can find our cheese and where you can source it.
Okay. And the Wisconsin Dairy Farmers is
WisconsinDairy.org.
Very good. Okay, thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Mark. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot and really have enjoyed the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Connie. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We've been talking to Mark Crave of Crave Brothers Farm and Farmstead Cheese. I'm Connie Kuber with Seal Pro Silage Barrier Film by Connor AgriScience. And you've been listening to the Dairy Voice podcast by Dairy Business News. Please subscribe, like, and share this podcast. So corn silage season has begun here in the West. And as you plan yours, remember to make safety the number one part of that plan. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.